Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual program, Meet Susannah Marren. My name is Colleen, and I am one of the librarians at the Ocean County Library, Toms River Branch. I am part of the team that brings adult programs to the community. We are excited to be using this online format to bring you programs while in-person events at the library are temporarily suspended. Joining us this evening is author Susan Shapiro Barash, who writes fiction under the pen name Susannah Marren. Susan has roots in Ocean County, having grown up in the Beach Haven Park section of Long Beach Township. She also graduated from Southern Regional High School. Susan has authored 13 nonfiction works concerning women's issues, in addition to her fiction novels. Her most recent work is A Palm Beach Scandal. For over 20 years, she has taught gender studies at Marymount Manhattan College and has guest taught creative nonfiction at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. She currently lives in New York City. You can learn more about Susan from her website, www.susanshapirobarash.com. Former Long Beach Island branch manager Linda Feaster, now chairman of the programming committee of the Friends of the Island Library, will interview Susan. We would like to thank the Friends of the Island Library for bringing this program to the library community. And now I'm going to turn this over to Linda and Susan.
Good evening and welcome everyone to our conversation with Susannah Marren. I would like to thank Susannah for being with us tonight. And I know from past experience that we're going to have a very interesting discussion. I've been involved with the Friends of the Island Library for more than 35 years. And in that time, I've met and learned from many different people, and I've seen the group go through many different phases. But when I began looking into the history, I discovered what a truly exceptional heritage they had. The Friends were formed in early 1959 by members of the Long Beach Island community who were dedicated to ensuring that LBI had permanent library services. And the way they did that was by building the first branch of the Ocean County Library. They obtained a donation of land, they held fundraisers, and they rallied local tradesmen like builders, masons, electricians, and plumbers to volunteer their time to construct the building. The library shelves were stocked by local high school student volunteers over Christmas break, and the first open house of the Island Library was on West 16th Street in Ship Bottom, New Jersey, was held on January 16, 1960. As I read through the list of the charter members of the Friends of the Island Library, I came across many familiar names like Ulrich, Krug, Walnut, Reed, Marine, Thomas, and Shapiro. Selma Shapiro, Susan's mother. Susan and her family have always been connected to our family and our friends. Our program tonight is a cooperative venture between the Friends of the Island Library and the Ocean County Library. I want to express our thanks to the Ocean County Library for hosting the program, and especially to Colleen Good, the senior librarian who did the work of setting up the program on Jersey Connect, put the publicity together, and worked seamlessly with Susan and me on the format. It's been a pleasure to work with her. If you haven't already read A Palm Beach Scandal, you can borrow it from the library. And if you want your own, Booktown is selling copies with Susannah's signature on a bookplate. After our interview, we will open the discussion to questions. Please submit them in a private chat to Colleen, and she will join us to ask them. So one of the ways I know I've enjoyed a book is if I'm doing something like the dishes or making the bed, something where my mind can wander, and it falls on that book. With A Palm Beach Scandal, I'm still finding myself thinking about what the characters did, what they were thinking, and their motives for what they've done. The story is compelling and intelligent and presents us readers with some interesting questions about things any of us could grapple with. So welcome, Susannah Marren, our friend. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. A Palm Beach Scandal is about sisters, motherhood, baby craving, and a deep family secret. What made you choose this topic?
Well, thank you, Linda. And I just want to thank Colleen and you and the Ocean County Library for setting this up tonight, and to say that for those who don't know, that I grew up on LBI, and that in real time, my name is Susan Shapiro Barash, and I write nonfiction under that name. Just so I've spoken with Linda introducing me at the library many times, and I've always really appreciated it and found it special. So your question, what made me write this topic, choose this topic?
Mm-hmm. What made you choose the topic of sisters, motherhood, baby?
Well, I've long been intrigued with how families work, and I am particularly fascinated with how women fit in contemporary society. And for my nonfiction books, I have written studies on mothers and daughters and sisters. And I've done 3 different books on the role of wife in modern culture in America. And since the book I wrote on sisters, called Sisters Devoted or Divided, came out many years ago, I've had this idea in my mind for years that I would one day write a novel based on that research. And it would be about sisters who were very different and really put to the test. What was their loyalty, and what would one be able to ask of the other?
Palm Beach is almost a character in your novel. How do you know the place so well?
So as I said, I grew up on LBI, and I love LBI. Another place that I really love is Palm Beach. And my father was a ranked tennis player, but ranked tennis player for decades. And he was ranked in Florida for doubles. And we went to Florida, my brother and I, when we were very young, really little children. And my mother, who came from Brooklyn before it was cool, fell in love with Palm Beach. And so my parents became residents like the day I left for college. And I would go there all the time. And it's, again, a barrier island for people who don't know it. It's about 18 miles long, similar to LBI, but it's very different. It's very refined. To be honest, it's not a very diverse place. It's beautiful. There's the ocean, there's the intracoastal, so it reminds us of LBI with the bay and the ocean. But there's a lot of privilege there, and a lot of people have second homes there, and they lead a very materialistic life. So I would walk on Worth Avenue, which is the Rodeo Drive of Palm Beach, and I would walk with my mother. And based on my research for my nonfiction on how women feel as mothers and daughters and sisters and rivals and friends and stepmothers, I wondered how these women really felt. They looked perfect. They were dressed beautifully. They seemed carefree. But what really lurks beneath? And so I chose Palm Beach to set up a very dramatic story.
We think that they have such perfect lives because it seems that way, but what's brewing underneath?
Especially for women, Linda, because having researched all these years, for 25 years, interviewing a very disparate group of women for each of my nonfiction studies to find out how they really feel. And so they were diverse in terms of age, ethnicity, race, religion, what part of the country they come from. And I would listen to how they felt about their emotional needs. If you're unhappy in a marriage, it really doesn't matter how much money you earn or what level of education you've achieved. If you have a troubling teenager or a troubling grandchild, then you're struggling with it. If your friend is no longer feeling loyal to you, then again, it doesn't matter where you live or your level of education. So for the emotional, universal feelings of women, I really found that it doesn't matter so much what part of the country you're at or in. On the other hand, Palm Beach is fantastic because everyone believes in a capitalistic society that if you have a beautiful home and beautiful things, that life will be perfect. And it just isn't like that for women.
True, anywhere.
Exactly.
So what is your message about family and about loyalty in your novel?
Well, I think that families are many times very hierarchical, And so I really wanted to look at that. I wanted to look at what happens to the older sister Elodie. So let me, without no spoiler here, but I can talk a little about the book. So this is a story that's really a triangle. It's the story of the mother named Veronica, who's in her 60s, and her two daughters, Elodie, who is 40, and Aubrey, who is 32. And so her daughter should be grown, but for many of us who have daughters and sons who are of a certain age, we know that lately it hasn't really seemed like that for the last few decades. And so Veronica is a perfect wife, and she's worked very hard at that. And so I'm interested in how her marriage is even in jeopardy once her daughters, again, I don't want to spoil the book, once these daughters have a big issue and uncover a big secret. So I'm looking at also how we raise our children. Elodie is the achiever. She's an Ivy Leaguer. She's married the right guy. She has a beautiful home. She has a great job at the Palm Beach Literary Society. And so life would be perfect for Elodie, except if there is a pie of life for women, she does not have a child. Aubrey, in contrast, and this is very interesting to me, is single by choice. Our culture is always telling women when we look for the glittering prizes, it would be husband, house, children, career, beauty, enough money. But Aubrey is really happy without a husband or a child. So she's been less pressured by her parents because she's younger. Maybe they were a little tired by the time she went through high school and college. And she has a lot more freedom.
It's almost generational.
And it depends on how much we're influenced by the culture around us. How much is Elodie feeling that she has to measure up? And why do so many women feel like that no matter where they live?
Yeah. Well, the sister bond is profound and complicated. Do you yourself have a sister?
I do not have a sister. However, I have two daughters with a son in the middle. And my mother was the youngest of three sisters. And when I did this study years ago, I was really fascinated by how these sister relationships play out. And I know that you have a sister.
I do.
What I found about sisters that's to me really interesting is that if you're very close with your sister or sisters, then there isn't as much of a need to go outside those female bonds to have close relationships. Whereas women who do not have sisters are always looking for a sister type relationship in their friendships.
Okay. I get that. I think,
yeah. And these are very close, but very different.
Well, they had so many similarities too with their appearance.
They look similar.
But that doesn't mean that they're the same underneath.
No, not at all. And of course, when I'm looking at family loyalty in this novel, I had done a study years ago called Reclaiming Ourselves about how women and all age women often sleepwalk through life. And then there's what we would call an inciting incident that wakes them up. And oftentimes it's great news and oftentimes it's not, but something that really makes us stop pretending everything is okay. And that's what happens in this novel, is that, the pretenses are taken away.
So you write nonfiction, we all know this, under your real name, Susan Shapiro Barash, and fiction under your pen name, Susannah Marren. Can you discuss how your nonfiction about mothers-in-law, daughters-in-law, the role of wife in our culture, female rivalry, female infidelity, why women lie, and sisters, how does that inform your fiction?
Because I've listened to real women for so many years, I really look at that research when I create the characters for my novels. This is my third novel. So, here I am, the teacher, because I'm a teacher, professor. So here's the new novel. And this is the first Palm Beach novel that came out in 2019. And before that, my first novel came out. And when I wrote these books, before I actually started the stories, I did the characters, and I looked at my notes from each of my nonfiction books. And I also really looked at the books themselves, and the research about what really compels women. And I wanted it to be very authentic in terms of character.
So what made you decide to transition from nonfiction to fiction?
Well, first I should say that growing up on LBI, you have lots of time to write if you want to be a writer. So I wrote a lot in high school, and I thought I was a poet in college. And then I started at Columbia to earn for my MFA, and that was for fiction. And instead, as some women have done, it doesn't happen as much today, I got married and had my first 2 children and woke up one day and realized I needed to earn that degree. So I finished my degree at NYU, and I was starting to write novels. And then I ended up deciding to write a book on female infidelity, which now I look back on that. In 1993, it came out, and it was a really incendiary topic for that time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know what was going on because I was living in Connecticut and taking the commuter train, and I kept hearing women whispering about these things. And so I did a study, and then I really ended up just writing about anything that really fascinated me about women. I couldn't find a book on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law when I was a very young bride. And it was the late Toni Morrison who once said, if you don't see the book that you need and you're a writer, I'm paraphrasing, but the idea is you should just write it.
Yeah.
So there was no guidebook for a mother-in-law, and I really needed it. So I decided to do it. I have been a second wife twice. I have never been the first wife. And so I looked for a book on second wives and couldn't find it. And so I did the study, and that's how it worked. And also, since you asked about it before, the book on sisters really was curious for me because I really have wanted a sister my whole life.
Did you?
Yeah. And then, oh yeah, I would have loved it. Yeah.
Interesting. So this is a very dramatic story, an emotional story. How would you describe the process of writing it? Was it hard? Was it gut-wrenching? How did you do it?
You know, I'm in a writing group. I've been in this writing group for about 9 years. There are just 4 of us, and we're all under contract. We all write. And that's really helped me. So with it, and we always talk about the writing process, and we talk a lot about how some books really just flow and other books are more of a struggle to get finished. Mm-hmm. This was one where Linda, I really knew the story. I knew the beginning. I knew the end. Working it through, every plot point was a little tricky. It always is, but I understood where we would go with it, where I would.
So you didn't veer off. You just stuck with the beginning and the end, and you knew where you wanted to go.
Well, because I come from the nonfiction world, and because I'm a professor, mm-hmm. and the slides that I made for my students for my different classes are very specific. And for a nonfiction book, I sell it based on an outline. Mm-hmm. I think that I'm very organized, but I have friends who are novelists, and I've gone to listen to lots of novelists speak. And sometimes I ask this question, and they say, oh, the characters just guided me. I just let my character take me. And to be honest, I'm just not that kind of writer.
Everybody's different.
Yeah, so there are 2 techniques, and I really prefer the one where I know,
mm-hmm.
I know where you're going.
Yeah. So, A Palm Beach Wife, your first of the Palm Beach novels came out in April of 2019. So this isn't exactly a sequel, but it's another tale that takes place in Palm Beach. Do the books work together? How do they work together?
I would call them companionate books. It is a sequel. You could read one alone and not need to read the other. Mm-hmm. Some of the characters cross over. We'll see a few characters in this novel whom we met in A Palm Beach Wife. But I very much wanted them to be standalone books. And when St. Martin's and I talked about doing the Palm Beach novels, as they're calling it, my publisher, St. Martin's, we talked about if there would be sequels, and the idea was that they would just be Palm Beach stories, where, as you said earlier, Palm Beach would be almost a character.
And you have another one coming out. Okay.
I'm writing one right now, the third, yeah.
I hope that's not a secret, because it's not anymore. So this is a multi-generational story about a mother and her adult daughters. How did you create those characters?
Just circling back to what I said about being in Palm Beach with my mother, my father too, but, you know, shopping with my mother and going out for lunch with my mother and her friends, I was really struck by how ageism doesn't seem to affect the women in Palm Beach. And I think, as a gender professor, that I'm right when I say this, that I think ageism is a big issue for women in our society. So I was really taken with the idea that my mother was very confident of her group of friends, and she went to lots of lectures and lots of author events in Palm Beach. And she felt good about it at 40, 50, 60, 70, you know, onward into her 90s. And I noticed that other women felt like that, and that really mattered to me when I decided to write a book in Palm Beach. And so you said it's a multi-generational novel, and that's very deliberate. I wanted women of all ages to have a voice in this novel.
Yeah, you did make it clear that older women were very important and were revered and respected.
And I like that. So I wish the whole world could be like that.
It should be.
I know.
So your novel has a surprise ending, which of course we knew that was, you know, you just wait for it to happen. Can you explain a bit about this?
All three of my novels have a surprise ending, and that's very deliberate, because having listened to, as I said, real women in real time all these years, I think that one of the takeaways is that despite that we're raised as good girls and pleasers, and we feel judged often and measured, and we shouldn't be, but I think females feel like that in a patriarchal culture. In fact, I know they do. No matter what steps we take that are deliberate and right as good girls, there are never any guarantees. And so what I'm really saying is that we can do all the right things and take all the right steps forward and still be surprised. So I feel it's reflective of real life. And I also would like my readers to interpret it as they will. That matters to me too.
Yeah, I knew the surprise was coming. And I thought, well, how can I be surprised? I know there's a surprise coming, but it was not anything that I had thought it might be. So,
okay.
You know, it's like, okay, wow. Anyway, can you tell us about your writing schedule? And the story for those writers of us. Oh, you didn't hear me?
Say again.
Okay. Can you tell us about your writing schedule? How long does it take you to write a novel? And how do you go about planning the story?
So it takes about a year, very much lately. Yeah, about a year, and it's with me all the time. I really think of the characters as if it's as if I'm seeing them. They're very visceral for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I know the beginning and I know the end. And until my beloved mother died 2.5 years ago, she was my first reader for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughters always do. And so I will show early pages, and then I'm in that writing group that I mentioned. So I will write chapter by chapter. I write every day. My schedule is not, it's interesting. Early on during the pandemic, I read a piece, I think it was in the Times or the Journal, and it was by a writer. And he said, writing schedules aren't really so different. We're used to writing. The whole world is working at home and adjusting, but writers too, except that I've been teaching for over 22 years at Marymount, Manhattan. And so my writing schedule is that I teach early classes. I start at 8:30. I do at 10 o'clock. I do advisement, and then I go home and I write really through till dinner, and then again if we have no plans.
Do you ever procrastinate?
Not for long. My theory about that is that it's so much more misery if I put it off, that I might as well get it, get the writing in. But I have actually been really impressed with interviews, and I've gone to actual lectures, mostly at the 92nd Street Y in New York, where writers will talk about their schedule, Linda, and it's rigid and it's impressive. Because I've been writing and raised 3 children and have been teaching, I have to be more acrobatic than that. So I write as I can, but I write every day.
But it would be easy to put off not writing because you had all those other things to do.
Yeah, but I think that, I always say writers are different. Perhaps are other artists too, but writers are different from other people. I said to all 3 of my children, they're really good writers. I said, if there's any other career that speaks to you, consider it. Because it's a tough one, and you're alone a lot.
Yeah, you are, but you're expressing yourself too. So you grew up here on Long Beach Island, which I know is pretty far removed from cultural centers and diversity of ideas. I know your parents were very diligent in exposing you to experiences that would broaden your horizons. Can you talk about what drew you to transition from LBI to New York and the goals that you had for your future?
Well, my mother was from New York, and her parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, were very important to me. And I spent a lot of time in New York as a child, and Palm Beach and New York, really, with some Philadelphia too. So my parents were very sophisticated and well-educated, and they loved the arts. And my father, since Mark and I, my brother and I, were really little children, would buy us books at the Doubleday bookshop, long gone in New York. It was on Fifth Avenue. And he would buy us books every week. And he would, give them to us every week, that anytime he was in New York, which was usually once a week. However, apropos of my connection to LBI, I went to that Ship Bottom Library on 16th Street once a week with my mother, and we returned them on time, and we talked with the librarian, and it just really, I think that everything on LBI really factored into my career.
So what still informs you in your writing, in your life, in your work from LBI?
I think there's solace on LBI. I think it is so naturally beautiful. And the idea would be, to write and then take a walk along the beach.
Kind of ideal.
Beautiful. And actually, in writing A Palm Beach Scandal and A Palm Beach Wife, I thought a lot about LBI when I was describing the sunsets and thinking of the beach scenes. So, there's some similarities.
Yeah, there are.
Not of the culture as much as just physicality.
So one last question it's a surprise question. And it occurred to me when I was writing up my introduction. That open house, that first open house on January 16, 1960, did you attend that?
I don't think so.
Okay. You would have been little.
Really little.
Yeah, okay.
But no, I don't think so. But I remember the library on 16th so vividly. I just think about it.
Yeah. It's a special place. It was something else. So thank you very much for sharing this time with us, Susannah. I'm going to turn this over now to Colleen. Thank you everyone who's attending. I see we have a lot of people in watching us tonight. So thank you very much for coming. And Colleen, I'm going to turn this over to you. I will mute my mic. And thank you, Susan. I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. That was a wonderful discussion. And as you said, we have lots of participation here and some questions for you, Susan. The one I have here is, are you considering writing about a post-COVID world? For example, how women in particular have emerged from the pandemic time?
You know, that's such an interesting question. There's a lot of talk with among writers and with their book agents about what to do about that. You know, here I am writing the third in this trilogy. And the question is, can we just gloss over what's transpired, what's transpiring, and just go back to what looks, you know, look at last February, what a gentle world, what a free time it was for us. or do we approach it and talk about after the virus? And it still remains to be determined what I will do. I'm actually working with both ways of telling my next story. So that really is a salient question. And I think a lot of writers, novelists for sure, are you know, struggling with what to do about that. And let me just say one more thing, you know, because there is the theory that books, particularly fiction, transport us and take us away from our everyday lives, perhaps people won't want to read about lots of references to the virus. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, and for the next question, in your novels, what is the easiest age of a woman for you to write about? And what age represents more of a writing challenge as far as character development?
Because women intrigue me, and because, as I mentioned before, because we live and will die in a patriarchal culture, despite the great gains for women of all ages, I am so interested in how a woman of every age feels. And one of the studies that I did on the role of wife was looking at, it's called The New Wife, the evolving role of the American wife. And in that study, I looked at 50s wives, 60s wives, all the way up through till, you know, 2000, till the early 2000s. What really interested me is how much the time that we live in and the age we're at, like say women who in the early 60s had a very different point of view of marriage than by the end of the 60s, because there'd been the Vietnam War and the second wave of feminism and bra burning and the pill, and so much had happened for women that it changed them. So when I write a book that takes place in present time, I'm very comfortable with all the different ages of the characters because I've really researched them. And I feel like I understand their essence and how much the time period has created who they are.
Okay, we have another question. Could you compare how the creative process differs for you for your nonfiction versus your fiction writing?
The nitty-gritty aspect of sitting down in front of a desktop and writing for several hours is the same. When I write a nonfiction book, I've interviewed several hundred women after I've sold the book to the publisher. And those interviews have taken months, and I have them in, and I don't tape women. So I have very, you know, detailed files, and everything is on my desk. I have a stack of books from the library, usually at the college. And those are my research books. And then I have, you know, a laptop to do research and look at pop culture. So I have a lot of stuff on my desk, and I'm really thinking of my thesis. So in contrast, a novel is like going to a movie in my head. I know the characters, they're my characters. every word that they say, I am creating, whereas for the research I've done in the interviews, every word that I write per woman is her voice. Every word belongs to her. So it's really very different. And it's very dramatic to write a novel. Linda said it's a dramatic story. There's a lot of emotion there that isn't research, but that I'm really creating. So it's different. It's a different experience. And I love both forms. I really do.
That really does sound like such a different process.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining how you tackle both of them. We have another question about your writing. Could you walk us through your personal experience of publishing your first novel?
Well, first what happened, about 10 years ago, I woke up and I decided that I wanted to go back to fiction writing. And as I had said earlier, I've earned my master's degree in fiction writing. And so I decided to take a writing course. And for anyone who's on tonight who is writing, I really urge you to take a course. At local libraries often do it, and there are so many online courses. So I decided to go back, and so I decided to apply for an advanced fiction writing workshop at the 92nd in New York, which I think has really impressive programming. And so here's the story. I told a woman I swim at the Y in New York because I've been swimming there since college. And she ran some of the programming, and I said, I'm going to apply for an advanced writing workshop. And she said to me, oh, Susan, you're so well known for your nonfiction. Why would you do that? She said, it's very competitive. I don't think you'll get in. So I marched home and took one of those novels I'd written and put in a cupboard. And I Xeroxed some pages. I didn't even have it like on my computer. It was so old. And I applied and I got into this advanced writing workshop. And I learned so much there. It really, really changed my life. It really made such a difference. And then I told my book agent, and I said, I'm writing a novel. And she said, well, let me see it. And I gave it to her. And she said, why haven't you been writing fiction? I said, because I've been writing nonfiction. So we went to several publishers with it, to some of the big publishers. And I ended up staying with St. Martin's, who's published most of my nonfiction. So that's really the segue. And that novel is called Between the Tides, and it came out in 2015.
Okay, so as far as your process goes, who is your first reader now, outside of your writers group?
Now that my mom isn't here, Howard, right there in the kitchen. My husband-ish, Howard. So he's the first reader, and my daughters still.
That's great. We have another question about, do you prefer in-person book interviews rather than virtual?
Oh, these are such good questions. What a great group. Well, here's the thing, when my book was always coming out September 15th. And when COVID hit, I was supposed to go on a pretty extensive tour. For a Palm Beach wife, I did about 40 live events, and I went around the country a bit. And it was really amazing. It was just wonderful. And a lot of writers do that. And so everything changed. And for people whose books came out right like after, at the beginning, April, May, it wasn't so established and things weren't as polished as tonight, the way that Colleen and Linda are running the program. And I attended a lot of them for my friends and for writers I like. And it was tricky. And now things are more, sophisticated and honed, and it's going better, but I really miss getting to meet people. It's just different. And the reason Booktown, since Colleen mentioned it, has signed books is because they asked for book plates. And so authors all around the country are doing virtual events such as tonight, and then they're sending book plates that are signed to the bookstores. So everyone has done very well with Plan B, but it's tricky. It's different.
It is. It is. I agree. But we're so grateful to you that you're able to do this virtual experience for us, since we can't do the in-person program right now. So it's a great way to connect with you, and we really appreciate that. I am going to push out the link to Booktown. So if anybody didn't catch that earlier, this is the link if you are interested in purchasing a copy of Susan's work and having the book plate inserted into it. So there's the link to Booktown. And of course, you can also borrow copies from the library. I'll push the link into the chat box there. And let's see if there are any other questions. So far, no, but let me just check one more time. That's it. I'll do one more solicitation. Does anybody else have questions for Susan or for Linda?
If there are no more questions, I just wanted to say a little bit more about the novel for a moment.
Sure.
I wanted to say that while I wouldn't give away the book, that there, with the first 30 or 40 pages, we learn the big ask that Ellie asks of her sister and how it's precipitated. So as I told you a while ago, Ellie has an almost perfect life, and perfection for so many of us as women, and we want to appear a certain way. And I always say to my students in the class Miriam, because there is the topic, how much of female behavior is within us, it is our nature, and how much of it is nurture, is the societal. So for Elodie, she is not able to have a child, and she's 40. And so I'm looking at her as a woman who feels she's incomplete or she's failed. And I'm looking at her as a wife with a husband who has achieved everything he wants. He's very successful and handsome. He's really an it husband, her husband, James. And I'm asking of her what will fix this, but the pressure comes from her husband. Her husband really wants her to ask her sister Aubrey, the free spirit, to carry the baby. And so Aubrey is so astonished. She says that she's never even been asked to do anything as the second child in this family. All she's had to do is show up for dinner, really, for years. And here she's being asked such a great life-changing commitment. You know, she's asked to really do something way beyond anything she could have ever imagined. So I'm looking at what happens to us in families when profound changes take place. And I'm looking at the bioethics of surrogacy too, because years ago, I was asked to write a book that did not get published, but I was commissioned to do a book on gestational carrier and fertility and infertility, just to take a look at it. And I flew all over the country. The publisher sent me to the Center for Surrogate Parenting in LA, and I talked to the lawyer for Baby M, and I really did the research. And that stuck with me for years. And so I wanted this book to be about that and about the bioethics of it. It's really the story. And then once Aubrey commits to her sister, it's about how much it changes both of them. And then, of course, a deep family secret. So I really wanted a story within a story, but it was because of my research all those years ago for sisters, where I have a chapter in that book on a sister who is infertile, asking her sister to be the carrier, or sometimes, also an egg. And so I had done so much research on it in order to write this book. So since Linda and I didn't really talk about that, I just wanted to mention what you would call in screenwriting the inciting incident, which is what Elodie asks of her sister. That's all.
Well, we do have another question that came in. Will you get the audio version out there for people to listen to?
The audio version is already done, and actually it was very exciting because my publisher told me that a company that does audio books, had bought the rights to this book, and they offered two different actors. They offered several actors who auditioned, and I listened to it. This was in May, and I listened to their voices. It was very hard to choose because I thought they were all so good. And I chose two, and then the company rather that bought the rights, the audio rights, said that since this book is told in Elodie's voice and Aubrey's voice, so it's Elodie, Aubrey, it's the two different sisters speaking only, first person close. They had two actors read it, so it's a really great rendition of the book because it's two very different voices, really depicting the sisters, and I think that it's amazing.
Okay, I put out a last call for questions, and we have one that says, is there any chance for a movie?
You know, every writer dreams of that their novel will be on the screen, and of course, that would be fantastic. So in the past, several of my books have been optioned. Tripping the Prom Queen, The Truth About Women in Rivalry, was bought by Lifetime Television in the early 2000s, and A Passion for More, my book on female infidelity, was bought by HBO. And I flew out to California, and I got to go to the meetings, and it was really thrilling. But I'm sure that, you know, I've heard that things get developed but not always made. So that's what happened. So if it would happen for this and it would go all the way, I would be delighted.
That would be something, and I would certainly go see that. Regarding the audiobook version, someone's asking if it is available on Amazon currently.
It is.
Okay, I do see a link for an audiobook that's available via Audible. Does that sound accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to push this link out then.
Yeah, it came out with the book. It's a version of the book. So for people who like audio, it works, you know, Audible, it works.
Great. Okay, well, thank you both to Linda and to Susan. This has been an absolute pleasure and a wonderful discussion. We also want to thank the Friends of the Island Library for bringing this event to the library community. And thank you so much to the audience for tuning in and for participating and sending us so many wonderful questions. And again, this program will be available through the library's YouTube channel in a few days. So we'll look forward to seeing that, and you can share this link with anyone. So thank you again, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Colleen and Linda, thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Support public libraries. Like, share, and subscribe for more great videos.